Thank you for purchasing your new Brute Jetter, manufactured by Jetters Northwest. This is Steve Jones, or Jonesy if you've seen our Get Jetting video series on YouTube. This video is going to go through the unboxing and what to expect when you receive your new Brute Jetter. We will also go through basic component identification and how to set up your Brute so it is ready for you to fuel up and to get jetting. If you also ordered an auxiliary water tank kit with your Brute Jetter, this next section will identify all of the hoses and fittings and then demonstrate how to make connections to your Brute Jetter. Stored inside the water tank for shipping are 3 hoses, several fittings, and 5 hose clamps. Let's identify these. 1 6-foot by 1.5" suction hose, 1 1.5 foot by 1.5" suction hose, 1 10-foot by smaller 1/2" bypass return hose with 1/2" quick connect adapter, 1 1/2" T-fitting with pipe threads all around, 1 1.5" hose barb with male pipe threads, 1 1.5" 90-degree street elbow with pipe threads, 1 1.5" hose barb with 1.25" male pipe thread, 1 1.5" 90-degree hose barb elbow with male threads, 1 1.5" knife valve or gate valve with hose barbs, 4 band clamps for clamping down the 1.5" suction hoses, 1 reducer bushing from 1.5" to 1.25" for connecting to the T that I mentioned earlier, and the drain plug is the plug that you will have removed from the Brute Jetter. Moving on to the small fittings, there's 1 garden hose female swivel fitting with 3/4" inch brass elbow, 1 1/2" 90-degree hose barb for connecting the return hose to the top of the water tank, and lastly 1 small band clamp for that 1/2" return hose. Now that we have all the components identified, let's make the connections between your water tank and your Brute Jetter. Now, if you haven't already, you'll first need to remove the 1.25" plug from the back of your Brute Jetter and set it aside. Start by installing the 1.5" threaded hose barb elbow fitting into the fitting underneath the water tank as displayed here. We recommend that you seal all pipe threads with a good pipe thread sealant such as Rector Seal True Blue pipe sealant on all of the threaded connections. Once you've installed that elbow, the first hose to connect is the short 1.5 foot long 1.5" hose. Grab one of the larger hose clamps also and insert the hose into the clamp. Next, slide the hose over the hose barb on the elbow, making sure that it pushes all the way down on the barb. Tighten the hose clamp with a 5/16 inch nut driver or very carefully with a ratchet wrench. Be very careful not to over tighten and strip the worm gear clamp, which will result in a water leak or an air suction point, which is bad for your jetter's pump. Now we'll connect the knife valve using another worm gear clamp and repeating the process. Once the knife valve is installed, the next connection we will make is the T-fitting, with which we can create a drain point by inserting the bushing and the plug into either the branch port of the T, which will allow the hoses to run straight, or insert the plug into the run port of the T, which will allow the hoses to make a 90-degree turn. If desired, instead of plugging, you could add a separate drain hose to the open port of the T at this point, and you could extend that out toward the door. Using a flat roll-up type hose works nicely for this, and you certainly can add another drain valve at that point. Moving forward, connect the 1.5" hose barb with 1.5" threads into the open port of the T, and then connect the 6-foot long suction hose to that hose barb using another hose clamp. Now at this point, if you want to shorten the 6-foot hose, use a hacksaw to cut the hose to your desired length, being careful not to cut the hose too short, as that can put stress on the fittings or a kink in the hose. Now we're ready to connect fittings into the Brute Jetter. Grab the 1.5" hose barb with the smaller 1.25" threads and the 1.5" 90-degree street elbow. Here, Aaron is demonstrating that you do not need to use the street elbow if you don't need it. It is simply there, so if you need to make a 90-degree turn one way or the other at the Brute's inlet, you have the fitting available to do it. Or you can just go straight in with the hose barb, as Aaron will demonstrate, using the last available large worm gear clamp to connect the hose. Now that the suction hose is complete and installed, we're ready to move on to the smaller fittings and the bypass hose connections to the top of the water tank. Starting with the garden hose fitting, you'll need to identify which of the two fittings on top of the tank is the larger 3/4 inch and thread the brass elbow into it. At the other end of the tank will be the smaller 1/2 inch fitting, where you will thread in the 1/2 inch hose barb fitting. Again, make sure you seal all threads with a good thread sealant. Next, grab the 10-foot bypass return hose to make connection to that hose barb. Before you make the connection, you might want to cut that hose to a shorter length. But, again, make sure the hose is not too short and that it does not bind or kink. Secure the hose to the hose barb using the last remaining small worm gear clamp. Now, Aaron will demonstrate how to make the final hose connection and demonstrate the important placement of the Brute's water valves for drawing water from and returning water to your auxiliary tank. Pull the collar of the hose's female quick coupler back and then push the female coupler over the chrome-colored male coupler on the jetter until the collar snaps back. Give the hose a light tug to make sure that you've got a solid connection. Next, push the red handle all the way in to lock out the buffer tank above it and make sure that water is being drawn from your larger auxiliary tank. And lastly, pull up and out the yellow handle of the bypass return valve to make sure that the bypass water goes into the 1/2 inch hose and back to your auxiliary water tank. Now that the hoses are all installed, we can open the knife valve near the water tank, which will allow water to move into the Brute's inlet. Lastly, Aaron here will demonstrate removing the plug, which would work as a drain point for the water tank. Again, at this point, you could connect another hose to extend that drain out and open door. Roll-up hose or lay-flat hose works very well for this. And you could also replace the drain plug with another knife valve to work as a drain control valve if desired. Typically, you can purchase those extra drain items locally. At this point, your water tank is connected, the Brute's water valves are all in the right position, and you're ready to fill your water tank and put water to the jetter to get jetting. Thanks for taking the time to watch this Brute jetter unboxing and setup video. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us here at Jetters Northwest or reach out to your local dealer and service center. On behalf of Aaron Daniker and the rest of the Jetters Northwest team, this is Steve Jones saying thanks so much for your business and get jetting.